Hi everybody, it's Matt from KoreHealth. On this KoreKast, we're talking to our friend Killer K. Kilian, a strength and conditioning specialist with a great roster of clients. We spend most of the time talking about recovery, what works and what's baloney, and bust a few myths about sleeping and stretching along the way. And as an added bonus, you can watch Kara bust me up for using improper form on a Stairmaster recently. Okay, so without further ado, here's our conversation with Killer K. Kilian.
All right, let's jump into this. Kara, thank you. I appreciate this. We were originally, I think, going to talk just about stretching and stuff, and Jason was like, man, Kara's way too knowledgeable for that. She's got a whole lot more to say than just stretching. So I figured let's stretch it out a little bit. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about recovery generally, but why don't you just set the scene for us in the audience? Tell us about yourself. Give me your CV. Where'd you grow up? How'd you get interested in fitness? What are you doing now? Where? Whoa.
Oh, DJ, spin that.
Yeah, you should give that to Bieber's DJ.
Oh God, he would love it probably. Yeah. Hey, James, how we doing? So I grew up in Neshannock Station, New Jersey, a small town. Born and raised New Jersey. I guess my aggressive tone is definitely part of that, as well as saying water and not water, as everyone seems to mention out here. But I grew up in my family, a wrestling family. My dad was an All-American wrestler. My brother was. He was a divisional wrestling coach. So I was always around sports. I always played sports. Actually had the dream of playing college basketball, and I did. But unfortunately, after years of trial and error and constant contact injuries, so I wasn't just cutting down the cord to happen, ended up having 4 ACL surgeries. I went from basically pick a school, any school, as a point guard at Division I level to, aspirations to play overseas basketball to what do I do with my life if I don't have professional sports? And that's what kind of put me on this journey and path to figure out why was I done dirty, so to speak? Why were all of these aspects and injuries occurring to me and no one could figure out why? I was passing all of the tests, all the FMSs, all physical therapists, orthopedics. I had one of the best orthopedics in the country who actually created the double bundle ACL surgery, one of the first of its kind out of the University of Pittsburgh, Dr. Freddie Fu, before my last surgery. And even he said, I don't know why you're tearing it. You're passing you have the athleticism, you have the jump height, you have your cutting is fine. I don't know why you're tearing it. That really frustrated me to the point where I've lost my career. I lost what I thought my life's journey was, and no one was giving me an answer. And that started me on this path to, yes, I finally got my undergraduate degree at William Patterson University of all freaking colleges in Patterson, New Jersey, which was interesting at the time. I was only there for 3 months. Got my degree in independent study actually on free throws and visualization in the game basketball. Graduated real quickly, decided let's just get in the field and start getting our feet wet. Even though basketball was still in my mind, I still thought, you know what, I could probably still play at a high level. I actually walked on to Rutgers University for a quick minute and my knee blew up. And had to just kind of walk in the office of Vivian Stringer, Coach Stringer, and just go, yeah. Apparently life is telling me otherwise, even though my ego is saying something else. So got my CSCS, graduated, decided to work as a strength conditioning coach in North Jersey, and then also was in and out of New York City training individual athletes as well. And that's where I met my mentor, Mike Gadengo, who was working with a lot of the NFL athletes, working with MLB athletes. And he said something to me that kind of hit the stage hard and brought me to my place now where I am in California, which was, look, you're a female in a male-dominated, white male-dominated exact sense industry. You're going to have to be a bitch. You're going to have to be a bitch to get stuff done. And you're going to have to work 10 times harder than everyone else because no one respects you. No matter how good you are, no one's going to respect you. You're going to have to dial everything up that much to a higher degree. And then I met one of my family friends, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. And we were working back and forth in the city. And she's a muscle-centric physician. She's one of the best in the world. She works with athletes, celebrities, all that. And as I say, one cold February night, she said to me and challenged me that I needed to go get my master's degree or go to med school. That you can't just be a basic strength conditioning coach your whole life. You're not meant for that. You're meant for better things. And she mentioned Cal State University Fullerton in California. And Dr. Andy Galpin and Andy is the only person in the country who allows students to get their master's degree in muscle biopsy research. So I said, okay, I never even knew this was possible. Thought you had to go to med school. So let's apply. I applied I think it was a month. No, it was a month after the deadline. So I didn't think I was going to get in, but she made a call because we're family. She made one call and they accepted me. And 4 years, it's 4 years later now. I got my master's degree in molecular muscle exercise physiology, performed the first study on male versus female athletes during HIIT training. I've had 6 biopsies myself. Started training MMA out here. Like my first month out here, I was on the stand. It was really ironic how that happened. I was working my first year and a half out here actually with the Vans medical staff while I was in grad school. And I was walking on the beach and a woman came up to me and said, "Oh, how do I get legs like yours?" I mean, it was a really weird start to the conversation because I didn't even know her. "Hey, I have a friend, Antonio McKee and Jason Mike. They're buddies of mine. Like, you should train with them. You'd be great at MMA." I was like, MMA, like in New Jersey, you pay $300 a month and maybe you get an amateur fight, maybe not, who knows? Or you got to go all the way down south. I said, okay. And one thing led to another. The next night I had a little sparring session at Metroflex in Long Beach. And from there started training and didn't think anything more of it than this is amazing. These are an incredible community, a great support system to have while I'm in grad school, putting in some suck. And from there, that's in a nutshell, the 4 ACLs. One thing I didn't really allude to is probably subconsciously why I've always been so into not just training itself or training myself, but also the service to others and the science behind things. Mm-hmm. And training and recovery is also because when I was 3.5, I had my left lung removed. So I had a left lung pneumonectomy because of doctors, which is why it takes me a while to trust a lot of physicians.
I don't blame you at this point, man. It's these guys are repairing ACLs and taking parts from you, and that's wild. Do you currently only have one lung, or you have partial functionality on the other one?
There's zero thing there. There's
nothing there.
So actually, my trick with radiologists out here, because I don't have a primary pulmonologist out here or a lung doctor, my trick is when I do get an X-ray, because I do have one every year or so.
Yeah.
If radiologist says, "I don't think you had your lung removed, I think you were wrong," I'll show them the surgery. I won't show them the surgical report. I will maybe the next day or so if I see a pulmonologist. I know that they're, quite frankly, not that smart, because on an X-ray, because it happened when I was 3, my right lung is almost 1.5 times the size of the normal right lung. My heart is 2 pounds bigger than normal athlete's heart. It's right around 20 pounds, and everything shifted. So when you see my X-ray, you see a shade here.
Yeah.
And then
so that's
nothing.
that's what they think is your other lung, but it's not.
So they think, like when a radiologist sees us, they think that, "Oh, you only had part of it removed. You didn't have the whole one." Okay, let me show you the surgical report from 1995. Pull that up. The whole thing it's just everything shifted in an X-ray. It's all shading.
Yeah.
So
would have been a great Halloween trick, or a great trick to play on. If there was really like nothing that you could see there, Kara, I don't think you have a lung here.
Yeah.
Doc, what are you talking about? Did somebody take something from me? It would be a good party trick.
Ironically, I got in a huge debate with I won't mention his name, but he's a top doctor for the WWE. And because I did a show called The Titan Games 2 years ago with Dwayne Johnson, became a Titan, all that jazz. People love to mention that.
Hey! I think I did see some clips. I did my homework for this interview. I saw some clips. You're climbing up that mountain and coming back down. It's certainly on the table if you want, and certainly we will take it off too. I'm curious what your thoughts on it were.
I mean, it wasn't that hard. The hardest thing was doing it at 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
So people don't realize that it's Hollywood. It's also production. It's,
Yeah.
So we weren't doing that in the afternoon because it looked better under the lights and darkness. The hardest part was we were sitting in a backstage room, for hours getting makeup and then they give you a 10-minute notes. Okay, warm up, you're going, and it's 3 a.m. Like, wow, this is totally unhealthy in every regard, but let's do this.
10-minute warm up.
Yeah, it was amazing. That's like Hollywood for you.
Sounds like my type of warm up.
Yeah, I was gonna say
exactly.
There's probably a bunch of candy back there too. You'd have been great there.
Yeah, snacks. Oh, I mean, it was ridiculous. I learned a lot about fitness in that area.
So go ahead, Jay. Sorry.
I'm sorry. So the WWE doctor, what did he tell you?
Yeah. He said that I've been lied to my whole life. We had a great debate for about 2 hours. So the reason I mentioned that WWE tryout is because the only reason I even said yes to it at all is pre-trip. They saw me on Dwayne Johnson on a show and like, hey, we want you to try it. I was like, I'll never say yes, but okay, sure. I know the tricks of WWE. It's like going to med school. It's either your dream to do it or leave no doubt. Don't do it because you're going to be very much a basic bitch for most of your life, making no money, being pretty much broke in Orlando to possibly make it. I mean, that's what Dwayne Johnson did. And yes, that was his dream. So he made it to the level, but that's not my dream. So he didn't want me to try out. So they flew me out there. We're doing the medical exams. He sees I have one lung. He makes me go see a pulmonologist, see a radiologist, all these extra tests, because he doesn't think I'll be able to do the tryout. He thinks I'm going to get hurt. He thinks I've been lied to. I said, excuse me, sir. I don't know if you're reading this correctly. It says it in the surgical report 95, a full lung pneumonectomy. There is nothing there. He is very defensive. He just didn't want to believe it. I don't know. But it was one of those situations where I just had to shake my head like, look, you're a medical doctor. You're not even, your specialty is not in pulmonology. So I understand if you don't want me to, but I'm going to do it anyway. So you sue me. And I was fine the whole weekend. It was just funny to me. It was just, okay, I'll do your test.
I hope you threw that video back in his face as soon as you won there. The video I saw was of you winning, coming down the mountain there. I'm very hopeful that you threw it back in his face. He said, "Here, Doc, here's a video of me not being able to do it." Right?
Yeah. Well, this was actually after the Titan games there. This was this past November. I did it. So this was after. I just think I understood where he was coming from because he was talking about getting slammed on the mat.
Yeah.
But part of getting into the tryout was also the MMA aspect. As I've been slammed, I'm fine.
Every day.
He's thinking, oh, yeah. He said, well, if you get slammed the wrong way and it punctures, you'll die. If you're going to die automatically. He was being very aggressive. I said, you don't say that to a patient.
Yeah.
You can say it to me, I'm fine, but you don't. This is how you normally talk to a patient is if you hurt one rib cage, you're going to die. That's not, no. You know how much force it takes to crush a rib cage?
You've underwent that force like every day for many years now.
Yeah, I did it, 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
What's it like hearing that kind of thing? It feels like you not at every junction, but at every critical point in your journey, you've had somebody either saying like, "I'm sorry," or "You can't do it," or "You're going to have to give more." What is that like? What kind of toll does that take on you, if any? Right? Is that the drive that pushes you forward, or is it something that pushes you down and then forward? It just seems like there's been a lot of that in your journey itself. For
me, I think emotionally, mentally, spiritually, however you want to frame it, in my earlier years, it affected me in a negative way to where I would just get pissed off, have that chip on my shoulder, like, who are you to say this? And I think that in my younger years, that was to my detriment because I would overtrain. I would train too hard, too many hours when no one should be training 10 hours like I was some days. Going from the weight room to getting shots up to doing 2 hours of conditioning to doing it just in between classes in college just to prove everyone wrong. Yeah. And in science, we call it maximal recoverable volume. I was going so MRV. I was going so far beyond that my volume was so high that I don't think it mattered who you were. You were going to eventually get injured. But I took all that negativity and turned it negatively towards myself. At the time, I thought I was just trying to prove people wrong, chip on my shoulder. I later, as I became smarter and studied and started to utilize different tools, realized that was really stupid growing up to think that was proving people wrong. When really I should have understood that it was about having ebbs and flows, having a high intensity, having low intensity days, not always going balls to the wall, especially in terms of volume. What gets most people in terms of recovering or not recovering is the amount of volume they're putting in the day, not the intensity of it. They're just putting in too much work. There's a difference between intensity and volume and the exercise selections and sport specific versus non-sport specific. a lot of people are just putting in way too much volume because they think they're harder than everyone else. Well, usually the harder person's not hard after a certain extended time of volume.
Yeah, that's a good point. So now you're a strength and conditioning specialist, right? So you've got this knowledge and you're doing that to yourself, but you're also helping other people out on their fitness journey too. What does a typical day look like for you, right? What are you doing day in and day out?
So typically today's my one day off, but I still had a 4:30 a.m. client, so I had that.
People getting up early to work out in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
they got to make it to those production things before the sun comes up.
This one was actually a doctor, OBGYN doctor, who I won't mention her name, but lovely woman, but definitely needs to get in shape. So I work with a lot of practitioners as well, which helps me learn too, because I don't know anything about being an OBGYN.
Sure.
So interesting stuff. But typically I'm up at 4:30. At my first client, I'll have my own little warm-up routine. Sometimes I'll hit the bag. I have a bag over here. Obviously, I have my weights here and trampoline. I'll jump on the trampoline, just kind of wake up my nervous system. And my first client starts typically 6 a.m. So tomorrow, 6 a.m. start. I'm running through every hour on the hour with the client until 1. I have about an hour break at 1. I'll go through either I'll do weight training or I'll get on the table and go through the movements. Maybe I'll get shots up because we have a basketball court in the gym I'm currently at right now. Or I'll take calls. Sometimes I have calls during that hour break. And then I'm right back with clients till about 4 or 5. And then at 4 or 5, I then have 1 or 2, some typically outside clients. So I'm done with my day in terms of clientele load and athlete load at about 6, 7. After that, then I'll actually train. Most days, especially as of late, it's been just come back to my apartment, changing my environment and just going to work, being able to play either an audible book or my own music and just get to work, get sweat, turn the AC off, go, let the 100-degree heat run. And then I'll either go in my sauna, take a shower, and then get on my laptop and either studying. Like last night, it was studying about muscle memory for one of my other doctor friends who wanted some research. I'll read, and then I go to bed.
So quick, like 20-hour day, right? You get 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, right?
Yeah, typically. Not on Saturdays. I try to get to 8 to 10. I don't recommend that when talk about recovery, but at the end of the day, I think people take recovery a little too far sometimes. We're like, oh, if you don't have gear sleep, you can't train. Well, I think that's also BS advice as well, because in life, if a bear comes in the room, you're not always going to, I'm going to say to the bear, like, oh, I've only had 8 hours sleep. Like, don't come near me. You can't always get 8 hours sleep. It's not your life. Life doesn't revolve around that, especially in my profession where I still want to be an athlete and I still want to coach. Well, you can't be 100% in both. Right now, I have to be a full-time coach. I can't be a full-time athlete. So I have to be able to deal with the imbalances. I don't believe life's in a balance, but you can find ways to mitigate that.
Yeah. The recovery thing is an interesting thing, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, and I know you sort of tipped your hand a little bit there, but one of the things I had teed up for this conversation was how important is recovery? And if you can qualify that for me for like high level athletes and regular Joes like me, who are just trying to find an hour and a half to work out every day. I can run, I can lift. How important is the concept of recovery for both of those groups of people?
So for full-time professional athletes, recovery is at a 10. They need to pay attention. They need to have the awareness of that. Athletes that understand their bodies. So there's certain professional athletes that you have to essentially babysit them in terms of recovery. There's other athletes, professional athletes, where you can say to them, hey, how you feeling? And they know when they take it easy, when they need to take a recover, maybe they need to take active rest. That's getting more and more common, that athletes are getting smarter themselves as well. So they don't need to be babysitted. There's also other athletes that you would say, no, you are not. Like, we're doing X, Y, and Z today. You're getting a massage. You're not training 10 hours today. You're not training 3 hours today. You're going to get like an hour of rolls. You're getting an hour of shots up, an hour of whatever your sport is. We're not lifting. You need the day off. And then on the other spectrum, there's on the average Joes, that hour training where it depends. And when I mean it depends, are you training hard in that hour? Because intensity is important. If in that hour you're not training hard, really, what's the point of you don't need recovery.
Yeah.
You're not training hard. Your intensity is not high. And it's only an hour. So the volume's not high either. So we really don't need recovery days, so to speak. So that's where the spectrum goes all the way down to the bottom. Yeah. Now, if you have, also it depends, do you have injuries? Do you have life stress? This week, do you have a really high life stress and workload? Because exercise is still stress to the human body. People tend to forget that if your life stress, if you're having an 18-hour day, so sometimes my 18-hour days, I'm not going to be lifting super heavy loads when I come back here. I'm going to take that hour. I'm still going to lift, but maybe I'm working on more skill. Maybe I'm having a little bit more of a lighter, steady state day because my life stress was really high that day. So I don't want to add stress on top of stress. Because now we're getting into a point where now our nervous system is going to get extremely fatigued. And that's where our chance for injury increases as well.
I was just going to ask, I'm sure that the injuries pile up when you sort of pile on after a day like that. That's interesting. It's a concept I've never really thought of. If you've just had a tough week, a tough day, is it best even just to take it like, screw this, I'm not working out today. It's been a 20-hour day. Is that something something that you've done in the past?
What's your 20-hour day? Is it 20 hours of sitting down?
That's true.
20 hours you're a construction worker? Is it 20 hours of a construction worker?
That's true. That's a good point.
20 hours coaching? Yeah, so that's the other thing. I when I speak with clients, wherever they may be, when they say, I didn't even want to come to the gym today, but I know what their job is. I'm like, all right, well, you still need movement.
Yeah.
You just sat down on a computer for 20 hours. You need movement. So there's a difference there as well.
Yeah, you can see I've got this nice ergonomic chair back here. I have to sit in it 12 hours a day. So it's brutal.
Exactly.
Are you prioritizing, how do you prioritize the different types of recovery, right? Are you you prioritize sleep or massage or ice, or how do you kind of, what's the breakdown for you in terms of the most important? If you can only get to some of it, how would you prioritize?
Sleep is always going to be number one. Dr. Kirk Parsley does an amazing job of his research and mitigations behind sleep and why it's so important. Sleep is definitely number one. But one thing that people forget is that if you are not eating right and you are training too hard, it doesn't matter how much sleep you're getting, you're still not recovering. So again, it always goes back to where's your volume at? Where's your time periods at? Where's your nutrition at as well? But sleep is still number one. You got to remember, if you just train for 8 hours and you just ate McDonald's all day or candy, I don't know if you do that day in, day out, if the 8 to 10 hours of sleep is really benefiting you too much. But yes, sleep is number one. After that, it then goes into, it goes into nutrition and then the massage. So I always do the massage and the socialism aspect or the positive touch aspects of recovery as third piece. Because if you're not sleeping right, you're not eating right, you're not getting the proper amount of carbs and proteins. I'm not, when I say carbs and proteins, I'm not talking about branched amino acids. I'm not talking about EAAs. I'm not talking about your creatine. I'm talking about actual food. If you're not getting enough actual food in, nothing else really matters. You can do all the massages. You could do all the cold ice baths and hot contrast showers and the saunas you want. You're still not going to be recovered. You're still not recovering.
How much time do you usually spend on both a high level and a regular Jane or a regular Joe? How much time should I spend recovering doing something like that? If it's obviously you want to get 8 to 10 hours of sleep. I'm thinking about the other stuff, the massage, is it more water? Is it more is it better nutrition? Like what kind of, what's the timing on something like that? Because I know it's part of KoreHealth. We're doing a Core Habits challenge right now. And part of the thing that I'm struggling with is even to find that 15, 20 minutes a day to do some self-massage, do some release, do some stretching. I'm curious in your thoughts on that.
So ironically, I love that you mentioned stretching because there is no research actually that stretching is part of recovery modalities at all. So stretching actually does nothing for recovery. What stretching does is help improve flexibility, but it actually does nothing in terms of recovery. So because tissue also needs to have stiffness. If tissue doesn't have stiffness, you're not going to have strength and you can get hurt the same as being hypermobile. So it's a spectrum there as well. So you want stiffness, you want flexibility, but you don't want one more one way or the other. So I've met a lot of people, and this is myself. I don't stretch because here's my fun fact, people. If you can I say touch your toes, and you touch your toes with, you don't even feel the stretch, you probably don't need to stretch. You're probably just fine.
Oh, perfect. Jason, I don't need to stretch every day.
I've been saying this, my brother, before the science.
There's actually no reason. There's actually no reason, even research that have tried doing stretching and recovery, journal articles and studies, there's nothing ever, it's always the same conclusion. Stretching doesn't help with recovery. Either just foam rolling. That's another one that people blanket. I've had a few talks. I had a talk with the Michaelin Institute last week, and they all wanted me to talk about foam rolling and recovery. And I had to be very specific with them. Foam rolling has nothing to do with recovery. Foam rolling only helps with delayed onset muscle soreness. So that little sore feel you have, but even that, the effects don't last too long. It's only temporary. It's only that 10 to 15 minutes after foam rolling does it benefit with delayed onset muscle soreness or DOMS. Other than that, foam rolling, there is no research at all to say foam rolling helps the recovery.
That's interesting. I want to dive down both of those paths. I want to touch on soreness because that was the latest one that you talked about. So I did a very intense is a relative word in this group of people, right? But I did a fairly intense stair climb workout the other day, and my calves were just absolutely barking at me. What can you give me the sciencey kind of thing about what's going on in my calves? Why are they so sore, and how's the best way for me to alleviate some of that soreness? Is it this? Obviously, we did this a little bit, but it's not stretching a little bit because that's not really going to cure that soreness. What should I do? What should people do when they've got something like that?
So number one, biomechanically, I'm reckoned to say the way you're doing the stair climb was incorrect. So you should be going with the whole foot approach. So if you're always on your toes, that's all calves, and their endurance, they're slow twitch muscle fibers. They're type 1, which means that over a long period of time, they are going to cramp because they can only handle so much volume. So number one is, how are you stepping up those stairs? It should be with a full foot. Unless you're sprinting or jumping, you should never really be completely on your toes. You should be on a full foot, evenly balanced whole foot. So not too much on the heels, not too much on the toes. Think of your foot as a tripod every time you step. So that's number one, the biomechanics of movement. But number two, when it comes to you actually get a cramp itself, a lot of people say, oh, have banana electrolytes. That's not going to do anything. Once a cramp comes, it's actually your nervous system freaking out. So how do you stop that survival mode? Well, the simple answer is you don't. You have to chill out and let it come back to baseline. But one of the ways that actually is research to help mitigate that is with compression. So wearing compression garments, not as great as actually going on the Normatec boots or the dynamic compression boots and things we see.
Or the KoreHealth boots, obviously.
Correct. Yes, the KoreHealth boots. Yes.
That's right.
So the dynamic compression is actually, there you go, the KoreHealth boots. This is what happens to me. So, but those have been researched for recovery, and the dynamic compression helping with spasms, helping with that's one of the more research recovery modalities out there that I can actually say does have benefits. Now, do you want to overuse those benefits? Of course not. But when it comes down to the cramp itself, the electrolytes, all that jazz, people always swear by them, but really it's not about the electrolytes. It's your nervous system freaks out. It's going to survival mode. You need to allow it to go back to baseline. There's only so much you could do once it actually cramps. You can use a massage gun, you can roll it out, but I guarantee the moment you start moving, it's going to cramp again until you actually just end the session.
Interesting.
And then you could start going to recovery modalities from there, like the KoreHealth boots.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Talk to me about soreness for a second. Is being sore a badge of honor?
It's only a badge of honor if it lasts less than 24 to 48 hours. The moment that badge of honor goes past the 72-hour mark, you're just being stupid. So any muscle soreness, especially in an extreme sense, that goes past 72 hours is actually bringing your body into a state of overtraining. So that's not smart. You should not be that sore that you're sore for 3 days for that extended period of time. If you're sore for 24 to 40 hours, that's completely normal. That's completely part of life. That is a part of training with intensity.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Question about that too. So, I have my own theory on overtraining. I want to see what your thoughts are on it. I feel like the recovery movement, started maybe, recently in the last few years. But I feel like a lot of people who are not anywhere near overtraining like to use the recovery, I'm recovering mindset. I don't want to work too hard. I want to listen to my body. These types of people, I hear this all too often from people that, in my opinion, are not training hard at all. Mm-hmm. So do you feel like most people are accurate in their assessment of overtraining versus recovery? Or do you think that most people are, or do you think that the majority of people are overtraining and that they need to recover more?
99% of people are not overtraining. It's the market.
Yes,
and when there's a market for recovery, people take it, because especially out here in Hollywood, I mean, a supermodel does not need a Theragun after their band session. I've seen some stuff, but the term overtraining is a strength conditioning term. What is strength conditioning for? Athletes, professional athletes and collegiate athletes that are training or aspiring to be collegiate and professional athletes that are training several hours a day. That's where the term overtraining and the definition and the programming of tapering and all of that jazz became to fruition. So when an average Joe tells me they're overtraining, but they only have an hour a day to work out, well, trust me, you're not going to be overtraining. You don't even have enough time to overtrain because you're not putting enough volume. You might be going intense, but unless you have a previous injury occurring, or maybe you fell down the stairs, or a mechanical issue we need to start mitigating, you're not going to overtrain. You can't. You're not even putting enough volume in. So to spend all this money on gadgets and gadgets and, I need to take a few days off. Well, you haven't even trained hard long enough to even need to overtrain. It's not going to happen. Overtraining was developed because athletes were training too much, and we need to develop a system to help them to continue to perform and perform better and not get hurt.
At what level of volume should you start thinking about whether or not you're overtraining? Is it like, because I'll typically do, I could do 2 training sessions, we're grappling or sparring or whatever for an hour and a half, 2 hours in the morning, do the same in the evening, and maybe have a lifting session in between that, right? And we could do that three days a week or so. But at what level do you know where you're starting to, you might want to look into whether or not you're overtraining?
Yeah. What's a telltale sign? Like, there's not just like a thing that pops up in your phone that's like, Jason, you've exercised too much today, right? What?
Oh yeah. Everyone's got a Whoop band now, huh? Everyone's got a Whoop band.
I actually have a
track baby
myself. But
there we go. I don't have one of those yet.
You will now.
I have Oura Ring.
Oh, there it is.
You have one now.
That's because they're from New Jersey. So Matt, we should get you one. Harper from New Jersey.
That's true. We get it.
Guy.
Nice.
I love Oura Ring. You can't wear it when you're training. Obviously, you will break it. But in terms of their data, and how they create it, it's amazing for tracking HRV in your sleep. So I wear it every night to go to sleep, and I can actually see, okay, well, I slept like shit. Like, there's nights where I slept 4 hours, but I was 80 out of 100 for my sleep, which is great for me. And I know I can attack the day and I'll be just fine. But there's days I wake up and I'm at 30. I'm like, well, the problem also, though, with technology is people say, oh my God, I was at 30, I can't train today. Well, again, the whole bear analogy. Are you going to say, oh, sorry, had bad sleep tonight. You can't come near me. There's also, life happens. You need to also be able to be hard for life in that case. In terms of when it comes to, there's actually a very good, what I was alluding to in terms of technology, is there's a very easy and very, very well-researched way, instead of just saying it depends, to track if you need to take maybe an active recovery where you need to take a couple of days off, or maybe take a deload, maybe do 1 session a day. And it's actually testing your hand grip strength. So you don't have to go out and buy, it's actually $300, an actual hand dynamometer, where you hold to the side, you rest it to 0 and squeeze 3 seconds, and then read that number. So it's the most accurate and most proven system because the first thing to go is actually hand grip strength and the fatigue in your forearms and fingers before the rest of your body actually goes into an overtraining state. An easy way to do it without buying a $300 PT, hand dynamometer is actually go to Target, go to Bed Bath & Beyond and get a $10 digital scale. It's actually not digital, the anatomical scale. You place your finger and make sure it's set to 0. You place your finger and thumb just like you would if you had the hand dynamometer itself. Lock your elbow in at 90. Make sure it's set to 0. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Test it. That first week you buy it, test it, both sides. Then maybe every week or so, when maybe you're feeling fatigued, test it again. If that number was at 50, and then 2 weeks later, when maybe you're starting to be aware you have a little bit of fatigue, you test it and it goes all the way to 25. Well, that's already for you a key indicator that your nervous system is starting to get fatigued, and now we're at high risk for injury. Now we need a couple of days off or a deload week. So that's the easiest way to even at home test yourself. Just go get it. You don't have to spend $300. Just go to one of the cheap 1970 scales. You can get a Target, and you can just test your grip strength the same. And it's something I have a lot of athletes do as a daily, not a daily habit, but every week. Test that grip strength. Let's make sure that number is within 5. If it dropped 20 points or from 50, if it's at the scale from 50 pounds all the way down to 25 on that squeeze, we know we're looking at a week where maybe we need to take a couple hours off. Maybe we need to just train once a day. Maybe we need to not weight train this week and just be sport specific because we're asking for a problem later down the road if we don't take this week off.
Gotcha.
That's a really interesting.
That's the easiest way.
That's a really great hack. I couldn't have guessed that in my wildest dreams that would be something that would be a telltale sign.
It's funny because it's been well known since the 90s.
Yeah.
And I feel like every time I go on PubMed or the Journal of Strength and Research, there's another study showing the same thing again and again and again about hand grip strength and its correlation to overtraining or nervous system fatigue, it being one of the first factors or one of the first answers to, okay, maybe we're about to get full body fatigue or high risk for injury. And yet no one talks about it or uses it or utilizes it. It's really quite simple task to perform.
Yeah. It seems like it's really low hanging fruit for being able to diagnose something like that. Right.
What percentage of wrestling and MMA coaches do you think would honor that system if you showed them that your grip strength was half of what it should be? Or what percentage of them do you think would make you still practice at full force?
It depends on the human. I know Rutgers University probably wouldn't, but it depends on the coach. So there actually are a lot of coaches that are now listening to the scientists, the strength coach, the research. But to me, what I always say to any wrestling coach or even my own dad is you got to create trust and buy-in first with the coach and with their system. Then they'll listen to you when you say, hey, maybe we should incorporate these tools in or this singular tool in. Then the most likely will start listening and performing that when they realize actually there's a lot of correlation and actually seeing results. Same thing with women's soccer, utilizing the GPS or the polar heart rate monitors to track their systematic fatigue. That didn't become a thing until Rutgers women's soccer, who I was with 6 years ago. Coach Glenn Cook didn't want to use it. We started using it. He started listening to us. A year later, they won the national championship, and now he swears by it. So
Nice.
we have them all in different colors.
It only takes a national championship to change some people's minds. So, that's good. I want to ask you about
the wrestling team are trying to.
Oh, that's great. See, that's kind of cool. What are you implementing there? That same kind of thing.
The hand grip, they don't necessarily, because it's wrestling and they're grappling and they're rolling around on sweaty mats. They're not using the polar heart rate monitors, so to speak, because that will fall off, that will rip around. But the hand grip strength they do utilize in USA wrestling, especially at the younger ages. We did a study utilizing all body composition, and we used different hand grip strength devices to track and see. And we had over 300 high school USA wrestlers come in to the lab. This was 2 years ago. And their coach was all about it. So I know they're progressing in that sense in terms of understanding fatigue management, because we know how MMA, grapplers, any of that, particularly that sport, they're very big on the volume. And no, you're fine. You're a man. Let's go. Or you're a woman. Let's go. And, it is starting to change, but you're always going to get those old school guys that it doesn't even matter. It just doesn't.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Where do you fall, Jay? Are you in the old school camp, or are you going to have them grab the scale?
No, I'm both. So I'm all about the science for sure, especially because to me, there are very few people that are about the science. So you either got like the super old school, which I think is really like not a huge percentage. I think most people are like the new school, like recovery guys. You know what I mean? So they think they're doing enough, which is great. I love that because they're definitely not doing enough, which is exactly what we want, right?
Yeah.
But old school mentality in terms of training, but 100% I'm all about the science. Like I came up running track, and I think track definitely was one of the, if not the first sports that really understood like periodization and really made sure to manage volume, right? We have to run hard, especially I was a 400 meter, 200 meter, 100 meter sprinter. So we had to train super hard, but at the same time, it's like you have to peak for a very specific date and time, right? Mm-hmm. So it couldn't just be all go. So 100%, like I'm all about training super hard, but definitely like listening to the research and paying attention to the science and implementing all of that.
Yeah. On recovery, Carol, is there anything in your mind, and I have a list in front of me, is there any recovery technique that you, and maybe even Jason too, believe that's complete hokum? And I'm looking at mine, and it's like massage, myofascial release. I have chocolate milk on here, cold ice, cold bath, icing, protein, like too much protein, water, sleep, pain relievers. Is there anything out there that is like, people love doing this and it's bullshit, right? Is there anything out there like that?
I alluded to, it's the foam rolling world, the foam rolling and all the balls and the stretching world. I see one more stretch lab in Hollywood opening up, I'm going to lose my shit because there's a stretch lab. Oh, it's a thing now. It's people pay $200 to get stretched by a stranger for an hour.
Well, that might sounds like Hollywood to me.
A fool and his money are soon parted. Isn't that how that goes?
Money will always part. Absolutely.
Those are definitely the two for me. When it comes to protein, I will add this is if you're not having at least 1 gram per pound of body weight of protein a day, you're not going to be recovering. And a lot of people hear that number like, wait, I'm 150 pounds. It's 150 grams of protein a day. I'm like, yeah, I guarantee you're not getting anywhere near that. And if you're an athlete, you need to be having at a minimum a gram per pound of body weight. For the average Joe, if you're not having a minimum of 90 at least a day, you're not getting muscle protein synthesis. You're not going to recover because you're not even eating enough.
What if you're trying to join the Swole Patrol? How much protein do you need?
So Brad Shoulderfield, who's actually the man when it comes to hypertrophy and the Swole Patrol and protein, he actually did a study where he jacked people all the way up to 3 grams just to prove to people you can't get kidney failure or any of the vegan stuff, to 3 grams per kilogram of body weight. And there was no side effect. And actually the study proved everyone pretty much wrong in terms of there's no adverse side effects of consuming everyone says 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, but really 3 grams, you're just fine as well.
That is, for me, that would be 600 grams of protein.
The study was nuts. It had them having I think every 2 hours they were having 40 grams of protein or something.
I need to do
the whole day
on that program.
Yeah, those 18 pounds of muscle aren't gonna work themselves onto you, man.
Yeah, I gotta.
You got to work on it.
I'm on it.
The huge point of for him performing that study was because highly due to, and I think every diet can be for anyone as long as you individualize it to yourself and it works for you. I'm not against the vegan population, but he did the study because the vegan population has been taking their own biases and just running with it. And half the studies they're saying is why meat's bad for you is mice, was done on mice and McDonald's meat. So yeah, of course, eat McDonald's meat, you're gonna have some problems. But if you're eating good, healthy, quality animal protein, you're gonna be better off. And to be a vegan, it's quite expensive. I don't have anything wrong with it. My sister's a vegan and we get in debates all the time, but the worst part is the emotional side of things. Is if you're going to be emotional about it, it's okay. Well, you're probably not doing it right anyway.
Yeah, I'm not with the veganism.
I like animal protein just as much as the next person, but man, there was an interesting Netflix documentary, and the thing that stuck with.
Don't say it.
Uh-oh.
You're gonna say it, aren't you?
So debunk. Can you help me debunk that a little bit? You're strong as an ox, but you never see an ox eat meat.
I must say that my buddy James Wilkes, another MMA fighter who trained with me, winner of the Ultimate Fighter as well, he made that documentary. But now feel free to bash it because, yeah, I don't know what the science is.
There's a couple of things wrong with that documentary. Number one, it was produced in Hollywood, and the guy who fought up the money for Game Changers was a vegan, and he had a big multi-million-dollar stake in this movie being biased. Number two, any of my doctor, and actually Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, my family, when it first came out, she was getting so many messages, made a whole Instagram post pulling it to shit, like ripped it a new one about like the difference in med school versus. So even when they were spitting the blood, that actually is not something, first of all, that happens. That's something you do in med school. That doesn't happen to your blood when you spin it. That's not how a centrifuge works. So there's a few things in that movie that were definitely Hollywood produced. Now, I wish I remembered some of it. There was another key point in the movie, or a document. Yeah, it's a movie. It's not a documentary. It's a movie. So in the movie, and again, I have nothing, and I don't want people to think like, oh, she hates me. My sister's I have a lot of vegan friends. I live across the street from a famous vegan restaurant called Crossroads. So if you want to come to a doorstep, feel free. It's right here next to me.
Now.
The amount of celebrities that go eat their very expensive vegan food is crazy. And it's like a bowl of chickpeas. It's great. So I have nothing against it. You can definitely pull it off. I have friends that, the right supplementation, the right nutrition, you could definitely pull off being a vegan athlete, but I think to each their own. Everyone's body's different. I can't handle it. My digestion does not like it, but everyone's different. But there's another part in Game Changers where he's speaking upon about the environment, and that the blueprint of going vegan versus the blueprint of eating animal products. And they said that it's bad for they basically were speaking upon it's bad for the ozone and the fuel emissions of consuming meat because of the production versus being vegan. It's production. It's a very minimal eco footprint, so it's better for the environment. That couldn't have been more wrong. And actually, Don Layman, one of my mentors, who's like an OG researcher, and Dr. Gabrielle Lyon's mentor as well, and he actually wrote a whole paper debunking that truth. And the whole paper went out to the government about it, because the ecological footprint of consuming plant matter is actually significantly higher than that of consuming cows and consuming animal products. So it's not bad for the environment at all. It's actually worse to have more deep plants. And vegans don't like hearing this. They get very emotional, but it's the truth. The production for making vegan foods, especially the Boca burgers and all the crap you see out there, is actually worse emissions for the environment than just eating animal products. And I'm talking about good organic meats, not McDonald's meat. That's a different story.
What's wrong with McDonald's meat?
Well, come on, you know that.
I thought do you even have McDonald's in California? I thought it was In-N-Out Burger in California.
There is McDonald's. Well, McDonald's has taken over the world, so you could be anywhere in the world. You could be on an island in South Africa, you'll find a McDonald's there.
In-N-Out is supreme, though, for sure. Yeah, there's no comparison.
Very good. No.
It does not come with a toy, however. So.
Oh.
Well, now Travis Scott has a McDonald's meal, so we're screwed.
People are stealing.
You hear about that?
People are stealing McDonald's posters from the window because they have Travis Scott on them.
I must be getting old because I don't really understand any of that at all.
Well, a smart move by McDonald's, but
the branding is great. I give them a lot of credit.
You'll understand this, Matt. McDonald's is utilizing influencers now in 2020.
There we go. That I do understand. But he had a $600 pair of McDonald's jeans. It's like I don't really. Man, I haven't worn a pair of jeans in 8 months, honestly. But not that I would wear jeans with like the McDonald's logo on them either. Like
I understand you, man. We're from the same area of New Jersey. Trust me, out here, especially when I moved here, even driving up here, the things I'm seeing on Melrose, you got to laugh. Like, what the hell? What's going on?
I got a couple of random questions for you, Matt. Unless Matt, we had something else to cover. I had a couple of random questions I needed to.
My random questions are next. I have one more stretchy question that I want to ask you. Because of the stretching, we know stretching isn't good for recovery, right? I think we've fairly debunked that myth pretty well. What is it good for, and what kind of stretching can people do to maintain that balance between elasticity and whatever the other word is that's not elasticity?
Mm-hmm. So elasticity and mobility.
Mobility, yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So in terms of stretching, it's not for recovery. It is for, the flexibility component. So yes, if you are totally stiff and your sport is not powerlifting, because in powerlifting, you pretty much want to stay stiff.
You want to be stiff. That will
increase your power. That will increase your power output. That increases force production. So if you are that inflexible, yes, stretch. But stretch your training session. Don't stretch before. Please don't do that. It's like a rubber band coming out of the refrigerator. You're just going to snap. Maybe you stretch a little bit before bed, but the best way to stretch is not statically. It's more dynamically. So I call it stroke game exercises or stroke game stretching. Totally not a political way to say it, or, whatever. It sounds sexy, but it helps you remember. Nice. Is when you're going through I call it a micro bounce. So really stroke game means micro bounce. So whenever you're going through stretches, how about we wake up the nervous system to a higher degree and get a little more dynamic with it? So if we're holding a lunge, we're in your typical yoga lunge and we're holding it. If you perform a little micro bounce in your hip, no, not twerking, a little small bounce, it's not a huge bounce. While you're holding that stretch, you're now waking up. It's called proprioception. We're now waking up the nervous system within that stretch to a higher degree and getting a deeper stretch than we would if we just statically held it. Same thing when you're doing a lunge and someone says, maybe if you've ever been in a yoga class, someone says, squeeze your glute of the leg that's long behind you. You'll get deeper in the stretch. Similar thing, opposites attract. So you always want to be dynamic. You don't want to be willy-nilly holding a stretch. What's the point of doing it then? You might as well utilize the human body for what it's made for, which is dynamic movement at the end of the day. That's why we developed the way we did as a species.
Thank you. That was what I think I've been doing it wrong all these years. It's funny because everything you read online is very different, and everybody has something different to say, and everybody says, no, this person's wrong, or no, this person's wrong, or no, this is actually wrong. And I know there's a lot of that goes on, right? And you gotta take what you read at face value. So I appreciate the insight into somebody who has a degree in it and can understand.
Most people that are speaking don't have degrees on it. They work out at 24-hour fitness and,
Yeah. I put it this way. If someone ever tells you that my way is right and your way is wrong, you better run for the hills, because they probably are internet junkies.
Yeah.
Because there's no right or wrong way. There's just bad applications.
Yeah. All right, Jason, I just got fun questions next. Why don't you start her off?
Well, I have questions that are just for my own personal interest.
Oh, please.
I guess I'll start. So a couple things, though. I want to touch on what you just said about power lifters remaining stiff, right? Mm-hmm. Our dear friend Eddie Avakoff at Metroflex. Eddie, me and Eddie train like every day, jiu-jitsu and MMA. And Eddie's a power lifter, right? Super strong, great grappling, super stiff, right? So my question is, would you, for an MMA athlete, would you recommend, what type of strength and conditioning program would you recommend from them? Would you stay away from powerlifting type exercises, or what would you lean to for that?
So in terms of an MMA athlete, you would lean towards more of what I would call a reaction and non-reaction state in terms of training, more sport specific. One of the best books ever developed for MMA was Joel Jamieson's book, literally called Strength and Conditioning for MMA. And it goes through all the different phases. all the different phases in terms of the nervous system, in terms of exercise selection, when and where and what, because MMA athletes, to answer a simple version, is really, they're not powerlifters. You can develop strength without putting a heavy load on your back, because they're putting heavy loads on their back in their training. And MMA is what I consider a year-round sport in terms of the grappling, in terms of the rolling. You're always working on those skills. It's one of the few sports where you're always having some type of load or pressure on your spine. So why then, when you're in the weight room, would you add more load and pressure to the spine? Because at the end of the day, volume on top of volume, now we're not getting into recovery. Now we're going to have an issue later down the road. So when it comes to training an MMA athlete, you want to, if they're too stiff, they're not going to be able to kick very well, are they? So we have to make sure that they're doing not so much the powerlifting aspects of things. So for me, I love when MMA athletes landmine work. So having different angles of loads, the med balls, anything with the kettlebell is great from MMA athlete. Anything with a med ball is great. Landmines. I don't love seeing any MMA athlete or jiu-jitsu or grappling with a barbell on their back or doing powerlifting movements with load on their spine, because they're doing that daily in their training.
Gotcha.
They're already putting load on their spine. Why don't we get them more reactive? Why don't we get them more receptive? They can develop strength. There's many ways to get to strength, many ways to get to power, to get to force without having to do powerlifting.
Got it. So another question on that same kind of path, right? So you hear all the time, like the big muscular MMA athletes, let's say like the Yoel Romero's, and you'll hear Joe Rogan or someone talk about how it's very difficult for really muscular athletes to maintain their endurance, and that they gas easier because they're carrying so much muscle. Can you give us tell us, is there any truth to that? And what's the real science behind more muscular athletes, combat sports athletes, really specifically, in their ability to maintain their cardio?
Being more muscular is really what they're trying to say. Is they have their fiber type size, is their cross section area is thicker. They have more cross section area, but it's an excuse to say that you don't have the endurance for the sport. You're just not training it enough. So if you're that muscular, most of your day you're not doing grappling, you're not doing jiu-jitsu, you're probably weightlifting as well. You're probably having heavy loads as well, because otherwise, how do you have that muscle mass that large? So there's a play in that, but it doesn't mean you can't account for those, what we call type 2A fiber types, those more strength dominant fiber types or fast twitch. Doesn't mean you can't add mitochondria to the muscle cell itself. It just means you have to do more endurance and more sport specific components to develop that. You can still train it regardless of your muscle mass. But if you're not training enough, you're not going to develop that skill regardless of muscle mass, because you can increase mitochondrial density within a muscle cell, which means you'll have more endurance.
So it's not.
So it's more of an excuse than anything.
It's not the fact that they have large muscle.
No, because you can increase mitochondrial density, which is endurance in a muscle cell, the same as you can increase the size of a muscle fiber in the mononuclei, which is the nucleus of the cell, the same way. So it just comes down to your specificity. What are you prioritizing? Are you prioritizing being bigger? Are you prioritizing being better at jiu-jitsu or being better at grappling or striking?
Got it. That's all I needed for now, Matt.
I like that now. If I tick somebody off who's really muscular, who's just got all that hypertrophy, I just know that if I just outrun them, he or she's not going to be able to run all that far.
Unless they've added to the mitochondria
That's true. Unless that nucleus is getting bigger or smaller, the smaller. I don't know.
The density of the mitochondria. Yeah. Well, it's funny to me because I love when bigger guys or bigger girls say, well, of course you're going to beat me. You're smaller than me. I'm like, well, of course I'm going to beat you, not because I'm smaller than you, but because I've worked on this and you just haven't. You're out of shape. Yeah. And of course you're going to, and flip coin of that is, of course you're going to lift. It's not an excuse, but of course you're going to lift more than me because I'm not lifting as much as you. It's a give and take, but you can't use that as an excuse. You're just not doing it enough.
I used to love using that as an excuse. Why are you stronger than me? Well, I weigh like 75 more pounds than you do. So naturally I'm stronger than you. Like pound for pound, you're probably stronger than I am. But that doesn't have anything to do with the price of tea in China. It's just that's the way it is. I can lift this thing up because I'm physically bigger than you.
There's also that component, but people love to make the excuse that it's just maybe train it more and stop complaining about it.
Exactly.
You're not being specific.
What do you think about CrossFit? Weird cult, good exercises. Like I'm totally curious.
Both.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's
both.
my analogy for CrossFit. Here's a riddle for you. What does it say under the word CrossFit? How did CrossFit get popular? It says underneath CrossFit, the sport of fitness. So take that in consideration. CrossFit is a sport. So if I take someone who's never played basketball before and say, hey, you're going to play one-on-one with LeBron James right now, and he's going to go full tilt. Do you feel very confident if you've never touched a basketball before? Probably not. You're probably going to get your ass whipped or you're going to get hurt because you've never cut on a court before. Same thing with CrossFit. If you've never been in an Olympic weightlifting room or learned how to snatch and clean or jerk and do all these crazy kipping or what I call salmon ladder pull-ups and all this time under load that's very high intensity and move under fatigue like that, you're going to get hurt. It's a sport. It's like any other sport. It's just like I wouldn't roll my first year with Slice because I know he's going to rip my arm off. Because he's going to want to go 100 and I don't have the technique to handle that load. I'm going to get hurt. Just plain and simple. It wasn't, I didn't understand the sport yet. Same thing with CrossFit is people, they pertain under this, but that's why I think it's popular, that it's the fitness journey for everyone, forgetting that it's a sport. So moms and dads, most people who can't even do a push-up are now snatching and cleaning, jerking a barbell and a kettlebell and all this stuff when they don't even know how to do a push-up. And there's great gyms out there that have the fundamental classes and they put people through all the bodyweight stuff to get that level. But it's the wild, wild west where it only takes $5,000 to own a CrossFit gym. And then you have these internet guys and girls opening gyms and they just say, no, this is the best sport for life. You're going to get fit. You're going to get healthy. And they start throwing a barbell in their hands. You're going to get hurt. It's a sport. And that's why there's big money in CrossFit now, because all CrossFit athletes are unicorns. CrossFit is not, the people that are high up there in the CrossFit community in terms of athletes, the full paid, because they're full paid athletes now, full-time athletes, they aren't the fittest humans on the planet. What they're the best at is surviving. They're the best at surviving under chronic fatigue, because that's all CrossFit is how long can you embrace this really terrible suck? Because we're going to go for this amount of time. You're going to feel like death, but can you survive it and win it? And they're the best survivalists. They're not essentially the fittest people on the planet, but that's the claim to fame of CrossFit. So I have nothing against it. I used to be a part of the community for a little bit. And when you start to realize all the different, I was having shoulder issues here and there. And, it became a help for me in terms of when I got out of basketball to help me, be back in the fitness industry and be a part of a community and such. But when I look back on it and realize even now, there's so much bullshit that people are portraying about CrossFit. And most of it is not true because it is a sport and you do have to develop the capacity to handle that type of survivalist mechanism first. Because across the workouts, you're essentially surviving for an hour, like 20 minutes to 30 minutes. You're just surviving. That some of the loads they now have across the workouts, like who the hell is doing that? Snatching 275 for 30 reps like in 10 minutes. Only the best survivalists are. No regular athlete is doing that.
Would you say that there's that kind of learning curve through the fitness industry sort of writ large? You've got people that try stuff and they fail and they get hurt. Is there the need across the board on a macro level for people to understand better what they're doing and maybe even what they need?
Of course.
At an earlier date or at a lower level?
Yeah, I think a lot of people tend to forget that we first learn to crawl before we learn to walk, before we run as human beings when we're babies. And yet when we go as adults, we think because we played, bocce ball when we were 15, that we could just jump in a gym and start training again after 10 years of not training. That is not how the human body works. unfortunately in this fitness industry, which is my biggest concern, and one thing I want to is my biggest passion in changing in this industry is having checks and balances. The problem right now is there are zero checks and balances. Any, John, Jane, or Joe can go on Instagram and post a workout and say, "Do this, I'm going to change your life." It could have no merit. It could be the stupidest thing you'll ever see. It could be 10 exercises in one. And people will buy it if they have a lot of Instagram. People will buy it and start doing it. And no one's checking or balancing that and calling them out that, like, what the hell are you doing? You're hurting people. You're giving people the wrong signs, the wrong this. It's your own biases. And it's concerning because that's how the industry has gotten. And now it's gotten so bad that, especially now with TikTok and now the Reels, like I can't tell I've laughed at something that's like rolled up. I'm like, what the hell is that? There's like 15 things in one. I can't even do that. And then he ended with a flip. It's like, try this exercise. Let's say that exercise. The hell is that? So for me, it's having people understand, which is why I even created my MAP program that I've always have beginning that's templates or anything. That's why I created a course, because I want people to start understanding what primal movements are and what it means to mobilize, what it means to activate, what it means to perform in the human body and progress, so that you actually are learning and having the self-awareness to teach your body and yourself how to start getting in the weight room, how to start moving appropriately. What does it mean to do this lift versus that lift? And what is unpacking the why behind the what of training? Because so many people are just like, here's my 5-week whatever. And it's just the hardest shit you've ever seen. And then, your 4-year-old mother buys it and was like, hey, I'm barbell squatting and I'm doing this and that. You're like, what the hell? You haven't even worked out in 4 years. You did Zumba last month. So for me, that's the case.
Oh, I think that's a pretty good, I think there's probably something to say about the why behind the what. There's some more understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it and why you're doing it in that way. I think that's a really noble thing. And if that's part of your course, that's definitely something that I think is well needed. What about pet peeves in the industry? I know we just touched on that a little bit. Do you have other pet peeves in the industry generally that aren't related to the why?
Yeah, I have one big one. My big one, and I say this to a lot of clients and athletes out here that always are surprised when I'm telling them little things they could do at home, or what I call homeworks, or referencing this PT who created a great YouTube video is, oh, I never knew that. Like, I can't believe no one's ever told me that. And it always gets so aggravated, because my biggest pet peeve is a lot of trainers and coaches, to any regard, don't teach athletes and clients how to be self-educated or how to work for themselves, or give them the tools or unpack the why from them, because they're selfish and they know if they don't ever learn, they keep them stupid, they're always going to get that money out of them. They're always going to need to see them. Now I'm making you dependent upon me for training, dependent upon me to be successful or reach your goals. And I can't stand that, because the point of being a coach, anyone who's passionate about it, the sole reason to be a coach or trainer is to get people to the point where they no longer need you. So if you're not teaching them to not need you anymore while you're training them, then what the hell? You're doing a disservice to this industry.
You're doing it wrong. Yeah.
Correct. If they always need you, then you're probably stupid yourself.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The same, it's the same concept for MMA, right? Like, when I'm training anybody, whether it's kids or adults, it's like you at a certain point, like, you're going to learn from me, but if you're going to be elite, you can't learn everything from me, right? You have to learn the philosophies, the mindset, and the strategies behind how and why we're applying certain techniques. And once you learn that, you're going to start developing your own techniques and your own transitions and putting your own twist on the fundamentals that we build. Mm-hmm. But if you rely on me for every single technique and everything you learn, you're not going to be elite. And that goes for anybody. You can't rely on one source of information to get to the highest level. You just can't. That's why you have to learn the philosophies behind why you're doing what you're doing, so you can add to them yourself. So I agree with that 100%. Big pet peeve with MMA.
I see that a lot. I see that so much in Hollywood out here with these Hollywood BS trainers.
It's
I've
because
all
they
these
don't know,
clients for years.
it's because they
They don't know
don't,
anything
they
either.
don't know enough. It's right. Generally speaking, it's because you have all of these trainers and these coaches that don't really know a lot. They know a little, and maybe they're probably not even at the point where they should be coaching, right? But they
know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah. So they don't know enough. So they don't want to tell you the little bit that they know, because then you know just as much as they do, right? So, but for people that know a lot, like you could tell, like they're never going to be you. You could tell them everything you know, and they wouldn't have enough time to hear it all, right? So, like you can give them everything that you're able to give them. They're still not going to know even half as much as what you know, right? So there's no threat for you in telling them everything you possibly can. But for a lot of these coaches, they don't know enough, really, probably to be coaching at all.
That's interesting.
Persona.
Yeah, it's too, the cult of personality gets you the clients. What I got two more, Kara, then I promise I'll let you off the hook. I like to ask Jason this too, and I think we've gone back and forth on this. What is one thing that you think in your areas of expertise, right? What's one thing that you think that lots of other people in your field, they think differently or the opposite, right? So what's one issue or area? It can be it can be anything where you zig and everybody else is like zagging over here.
That's a good question.
Jason,
okay. Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, Jason, what is normally your response?
Well, I'd say my response for you would be that she actually believes in, understands science. And most people over here are just like, in MMA specifically, like it's all bro science. It's all like, eat chicken and rice. And like, it's like people will tell you to do everything, right? They'll tell you everything you need to do, but they can't cite one bit of research as to why you should do it, right? So for me, that, between her and Dr. Capo and Andy Galpin, like as far as the MMA space, like those are like the only people that I listen to, because you have a lot of people like pretending to be these, well-informed and educated professionals and authorities, but they don't have any. There's no evidence behind. There's no evidence behind the stuff that they're telling you to do. So it's like, why listen to it? So that's what I would say for her would be the where she zigs.
Well, that sparked one thing that made me that actually alluded to why I forced Andy to do the first ever study I did with him, because he didn't want to do a female athlete study because, well, we're the higher hanging fruit, we're hard to study. And I said, well, that's exactly why we have to do this study, is because we have less. Up until my time with Andy, we had less than 50 female biopsies ever in research, which was the saddest thing I've ever heard, and thousands upon thousands of male athletes. So we essentially know nothing about the female body. So one of my biggest things is a lot of people zag towards, or most people avoid, let's put it this way, avoid altogether speaking with this, particularly female athletes, about the menstrual cycle, about estrogen, about why females shouldn't be on the ketogenic diet, because keto is primarily fat-based and it works. Fat likes testosterone. So, a lot of people that are pushing keto are males. It works okay for them for 3 months and then they kind of plummet. I always tell the story of LeBron James, because LeBron James went on keto for 3 months, and a lot of basketball athletes all of a sudden were like, oh, I got to go keto, like LeBron got shredded and stuff like that. And I always explained, I said, when did LeBron go on the keto diet? It was in the off season, coach. Okay. What did he do the moment the season started? He started eating. Oh yeah. Okay. He started having carbs. And I was like, yeah, sugar and stuff again, because you need that to perform. He wasn't performing then. He was just training. It does help you look good, but the performance decrease is crazy. So the keto thing is one place where, especially out here, a lot of people are like, oh, you should go keto, you'll cut weight up. There is no study that says that long-term keto is actually you lose muscle mass after a long period of time than just having moderate carbohydrate intake. You need carbs to perform. And it makes me so aggravated when all these people are thinking keto is the answer. Now, I'm not a nutritionist. I always allude to Gabrielle or Andy when it comes to, or Taylor when it comes to flat out nutrition stuff. But there's no denying that keto was not made for performance. You might lose weight quickly for 3 months, but there's no indicator that it's going to help in long-term health. You actually lose muscle mass. And then the other thing that sparks me is the estrogen debate, is that a lot of people forget that you need to understand. I don't care if you're a male. Like, I tell a lot of male trainers, get over it. Ask. Like, if they're having fatigue, having these symptoms, and they're having a bad week, just ask the question. They're probably about to either have their cycle or they haven't had it. And that can tell you how you can start to change their training and educate them, because a lot of injury for females occurs the week before they get their cycle. Same thing with when we did the biopsies on females. The hardest part about finding female athletes was that they couldn't be on birth control, which is harder than you think to find females that are on birth control, number one. And number two, we had to biopsy them during their menstrual cycle, because during your menstrual cycle is when females are the most hormonally similar to males. So that's how we mitigated having them all biopsied during their menstrual cycle, and the males just whatever the hell they wanted. Made it harder to find subjects, but
yeah,
that's when a strength training week should occur.
It sounds like there's a lot of work to do in that field. I'm glad you've picked up the mantle there a little bit. That it was completely. I know there's millions of studies out there, but I really didn't have a clue that if you had asked me, I would have said, sure, it's probably about 50-50, and that's really not the case. Male, female kind of thing as to what's being studied and how.
No, not at all. And the answer is because most scientists, most researchers like Andy are men. And men, regardless of how smart and how up the food chain they are, it's still an awkward question to ask a female counterpart. Hey, are you bleeding this month? Are you on your menstrual cycle? It's not a comfortable question. Yeah, it's not. I mean, I can phrase it however I want because I'm a female, but males, I've had so many people that I've had trainers come to me and say, hey, can you ask my client? I'm like, really? Like, it's not, just frame it like this. Like, it actually is very important knowledge to have of your client or athlete, especially a female. Well, obviously, I don't think males get their period, right? So
I don't know, man.
I say men.
I haven't gotten mine yet, but I'm a late bloomer anyway. So
yeah, but it's actually very important when it comes to training and recovery, and a lot of people just completely avoid it. I wouldn't even say they zag in the whole direction of avoidance, when it's actually very important to understand when you're training female, especially a female athlete. A lot of WNBA player I've been training, she hasn't got, every season she doesn't get her cycle at all. And she's wondering why she's having all these issues with her hips. I'm like, every season since you're a WNBA All-Star, every season since you've started playing basketball, you stop getting your cycle. That is a huge problem. And now she's seeing a few doctors getting blood work done. I'm like, but now it's not ironic to me that now you're having all these hip issues. I mean, you're also 6'8", but you're, now you're having all these, now you're having all these hip issues though. And you haven't gotten your cycle every season since you were started when you're 12.
Well, if basketball doesn't work out, ever come on to the gym, we could, in at 145.
She actually loves MMA.
Perfect.
She actually loves it. We spoke about
it. She's gonna have a long reach, Jay. Skinny people fight to their burger.
Yeah, actually, last week she asked, like, "Hey, can I ever come down to? We should set it up. It'd be funny."
Let's go. The official invite. It's on.
All right, Kara. One last one for you. If you weren't doing this, if you weren't conditioning and fitness specialist, training some of these folks, what would you be doing?
Well, number one, I would probably be in the military. So I've always wanted to be in I could not be a SEAL. I don't think any female could be a SEAL unless you're on a lot of steroids. But there's a biological difference between men and women, ladies. So stop acting like equal rights. We're not equal counterparts.
So that movie G.I. Jane that I love with Demi Moore, it's not
Demi Moore. Demi Moore as a SEAL?
Yeah. People always think that because of my hair and tattoos that I'm going to be this feminine. Like, no, there is. And then they get surprised when that's what I say is you cannot argue biology. You just can't. Like, if I'm a female and I'm against men that are obviously biologically stronger than me, do you think I want to put my teammates at risk in combat? And if they get hurt, I have to carry that man. I'm sorry. There's a difference. The reason we have two separate, things between our legs is we're different species. Anyway, for me, since I don't have the lung here, I never could actually be in the Marines. I can never be in the military because I'm a liability to the United States of America. So what I really would want to be doing is playing overseas basketball. I'd want to be a full-time athlete again. Like one thing I miss tremendously is being a full-time athlete. I miss that my core. Sometimes I have to check my ego at the door when I'm training clients all day because all I can think about sometimes is training. Well, most days that's all I can think about. But I had to switch my brain into thinking about how can I serve others in training.
Yeah.
So for me, it'd be being a full-time athlete. That's all I've ever wanted to do since I was born. And unfortunately, life circumstances pushed me in another direction. And it was a blessing. It's a blessing at the same time because it got me to this point in my career. It's something I still think about often. I mean, that's why my home is set up the way it is. So
I like that.
I have a heavy bag over here. It's on it,
Where's the squat rack?
Oh, it's right here.
Oh, okay, just making sure you didn't get rid of the squat rack.
Nice. There you go.
100-pound D-ball, 80-pound kettlebells, a pair of 67 kilograms, 35s, chains, all that. Yeah, 3 barbells back there.
I got called a timeout. Have you been standing this whole time?
Yeah.
Love it.
He's a different breed, Matt.
Yeah. My goodness. My goodness.
And
I gotta get one of those.
well.
I gotta get one of those standing desks, man, because just sitting all day. Isn't sitting the new smoking? I gotta stop sitting.
That's what they say. Actually, I think cell phones are going to be the new smoking with the EMF.
That's true, too.
Yeah. But barefoot is actually a great way to recover.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like to go I'd go barefoot everywhere if I could.
Yeah. I lift
barefoot a lot.
Really?
Yep.
I saw a video of you. You squatting with your heels on a weight. I used to put my Sunday loafers on heavy squat days. Good to know that tip is that weight in your heels thing is still out there somewhere.
Oh yeah, it's part of the athletic stance and tension. That's what the heel of it. You don't want to do it all the time because you do also want to understand what having a tripod balance in your foot is, which is why I primarily lift barefoot. So because I want to see if there's any changes in my toes, my weight shift. You lose that when you're in shoes all the time. You also lose the heat response. So a lot of the temperature release comes from the bottom of your feet. So if you don't take your shoes off, like I always feel my best when I'm on barefoot as much as possible throughout the day. When I'm in shoes, like tomorrow I'll have to be in shoes most of the day. If I don't take my shoes off immediately when that day's over, my knee starts not hurt, but I feel a little tension because our body releases heat to the bottoms of the feet, which is why the barefoot movement is merit. It has a lot of merit.
Yeah. No, that's great. Man, Jason, you got anything else for Kara? This has been great.
I just wanted to have a seat when we finish this for a little while.
All right, everybody. Well, Kara, I appreciate all the time and insight. If you guys want to find Kara, check her out on Instagram at KILERK0, right? Do I got that right?
Yep, I refuse to change the Instagram name.
I love it. All right.
High school.
And it's online.
And also my website.
Yeah, you're online at KILIAN.com. Kara Kilian, right?
Correct. Yep, www.KoreKast.com. You can always message me through there. Got my course up there. And yeah, rocking out.
Appreciate all the knowledge drops with us today, Kara. I'm enlightened. I'm gonna lift differently tonight.
There we go. That's what we want.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys.